my environment or situation. It even happens on that level. You know, it's like, oh, today feels like it's going faster in the morning. You know what I mean?
I feel that.
Yeah,
I feel that weird. A lot.
It's just something like I pay attention to and notice. But I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder what that is.
Maybe it's just subconscious. Who knows? Maybe that's what time is. It's subconscious. I'll probably take that. But I'm excited for this book. You know what I mean, man. Love is gravity. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this book. I don't know. It sounds wild. JFK assassination, non-human intelligence, time travel. It's an episode of Patterns Tell Story.
I wonder if they're going to link in that Maurice Maeterlinck play. So you know the play that Peter Levenda talks about in Sinister Forces that talks about an assassination, and it's like, well, it's this old play. I think the playwright was named Maurice Maeterlinck. I'm trying to remember what the title of the play was. Oh, and I remember it was The Cloud That Lifted, or A Cloud That Lifted, or something like that. It had all these like striking similarities to the JFK assassination and how it unfolded. I guess there was like multiple shooters from similar angles, as people speculate happened in the JFK assassination and how that unfolded. They used like the name of the main shooter was Allen, and I think that was an alias that Lee Harvey Oswald had been using. It was about this coup d'etat that occurred, and it unfolded, and it had to do with a blue bird, I think, had a prominent role in the play. And then we saw that famously the Operation Bluebird and Project Artichoke and all these different programs stemming out of the early 50s era.
Yeah.
I wonder what this new novel is going to have in it, or if it's going to allude to that play or any of the events of... It's got to. Or the 9 Seance, like that's the whole book 1 of Sinister Forces.
Yeah,
are they going to like talk about the 9 Seance? Like what the fuck?
There's going to be a UFO just parked in orbit, making these rich people look crazy. That's going to be awesome. I can't wait. It's going to be great. Oh, and Tom just did an interview too. It's funny, we were both listening to it. I sent you the interview and then you sent me a screenshot of the timestamp. I was at, basically. I was like 10 minutes out of you. But yeah, he did an interview with... It's actually like the lead singer of H2O. They're kind of before your time, but they're a punk band. The lead singer has a podcast called One Life, One Chance with Toby Morse. And yeah, Tom was on there for 2.5 hours, pretty much. Limited talk about UFO stuff, but it sounds like To the Stars is about to put out a bunch of really cool shit. That was fun to hear about. And oh, he did say that there were some monologues in Monsters of California, the movie he put out a few years ago. When that came out? That came out in 2023. And so mixed reviews, but I don't know. There's some cool shit in there. And he said that there were several monologues in that movie that he didn't write and that people should pay attention to. Meaning that sounds like potentially some of his advisors helped write some of those monologues. I'm guessing specifically the one talked about by the guy involved in the UFO program, or who ran it, I guess, who was part of MJ-12, apparently. I think it was Richard Kind played that character. What was the character's name? It was like Walker?
I don't remember their names.
Yeah, but it was like it was a reference to a literal MJ-12 member. I know it was there at that point where they showed the chart with all the religions and then quantum physics. And, so yeah, this is the monologue that Dr. Walker... He's a Penn State professor, allegedly. In real, like the real life guy this dude was based on. Eric Walker, that's the one. Richard Dolan's done a whole thing on him. Yeah, he's former president of Penn State University, allegedly part of MJ-12. Oh, look. PSU may have investigated UFOs. This is Penn State University Collegian newspaper. September 6, 1990. Alumnus Book Documents Official Meetings. A new book written by university alumni suggests that former university president Eric A. Walker may have attended top-secret meetings during which government officials talked about UFO investigations. UFO researcher and former Penn Stater T. Scott Crane Jr. co-authored the book, due to be released in September. It contains transcripts of alleged conversations in which Walker talked to officials about UFO sightings. Crane alleges that Walker attended these meetings during his stint as Executive Secretary of Research and Development for the federal government in the 1950s. Walker, who still lives in Centre County, denied any knowledge or involvement in government UFO investigations. However, Crane said his book contains evidence of Walker's involvement, adding that the former university president still has security clearances which could be jeopardized by his public admission of having attended these meetings. Quote, Walker is the first scientist to admit knowledge of Operation Majestic 12, the top-secret federal research and development/intelligence project allegedly approved by President Truman in 1947, Crane said. The alleged project, nicknamed MJ-12, consisted of 12 distinguished scientists, military, and intelligence officials appointed to oversee recovery operations of UFO crashes, Crane said. The activities of this group and government efforts to keep the public uninformed on the subject of UFOs are topics covered in Crane's book. Quote, we feel that the U.S. government has developed teams to recover unknown aerial objects, and that they analyze UFO hardware, and that there is an ongoing operation to duplicate alien technology, said Crane. The general manager of Crane Lumber Company in Port Matilda, Crane has been studying UFOs as a hobby for 22 years. Crane is also the Mutual UFO Network's local director and an investigator for the Pennsylvania Association of the Study of the Unexplained. The book, UFOs, MJ-12, and the Government also describes in detail the supposed 1965 UFO crash near Pittsburgh. So yeah, this is the Penn State college newspaper talking about how our former president was part of MJ-12. Eric Walker was the name. And that's who the main character is based off of in Monsters of California. In an interview he gave, I think it was March 31st was that podcast that came out. He said, certain people in that movie spoke monologues that Tom, hadn't written. I assume he's talking about his advisors writing monologues for Richard Kind, who played Dr. Walker in the movie. So I'm just going to read, I have a transcript here. Hopefully it's legible. But I'm just going to read this real quick, as this is basically... Tom is suggesting that this member of MJ-12 would have said something like this, or Tom's advisors, I guess, had written this monologue.
I'm nervous.
You've heard this. We've talked about it before.
I know, but I'm still nervous.
All right. For centuries, man has told the story of God, how God created the universe. And the universe was a well-ordered place with man at the center. But then man began to ponder, thinking about a spiritual world, a world you can't see, but filled with angels and demons. A story told within all the religions combined. Then came the 1940s, and things began to merge. We discovered a new life form, not human, not spirit, but very, very advanced. We didn't know whether or not they were good or evil, primarily because they wouldn't talk to us, at least not directly. But lately, they've been showing themselves more frequently. I think your father saw them up close and personal on the night they disappeared. And then the Dallas character asked, so what planet are they coming from? And Walker continues on, well, it's a bit more complex than that. You ever wonder why the world is such a mess? Why one part of the world is democratic, believes in free will, the other's authoritarian, the loss of individuality? It's competing races and the influence that they have on mankind. So from the depths of the ocean to the far reaches of any mountain range, or hell, up to the dark side of the moon, they've always been there. And throughout millennia, they would pop up every couple hundred years, and they would teach us something important about mathematics or language or science. But we hear these voices in our head. We get these ideas, an epiphany. You see, they've been teaching us and advancing us all this time. One of the kids asks, there's no way the government was ever going to tell us this, right? And Walker says, now you're using your brain. You see, these are things we already knew. We just didn't realize it. And the rest of the world, well, if they knew, it would scare the pants off them. The story you seek, the entire story, it's right there in front of your eyes, hiding in plain sight. Even to this day, Tom is saying, like, that is what's happening. And that he didn't write that monologue, essentially. That is the story. He's sticking with it.
Yeah, and then there's the I have a part from Monsters of California of the script, and it says, "Oh my God, is that what I think it is? Holy shit, have they reverse engineered it yet? They've been working on that since the 60s. I thought Roswell was in the 40s. It was in the 40s. Then 2 decades later, they started work on that. And then they started work on this thing called the Locust in the early 2000s. So yeah, he's big on that. The United States has this TR-3B craft too that they call the Locust in Secret Machines. And he always refers back to this triangle. Yeah, I don't know. The way he talked about how the government rolls out these advanced crafts, he said they do it in a very methodical way, and it makes me wonder if part of what TTSA was them being tapped to unveil this craft. That was like part of the unveiling of that program. Because if you really think about the most public-facing information about the TR-3B, it's come from Tom DeLonge. Like, I don't know there's the military website article that's super brief, but there's not really any data about it other than him and what I'm sure Steve Justice has like left his breadcrumbs, or Neil McCaslin, or I don't know.
Yeah. Lockheed TR-3B.
For sure. Yeah, so that's MJ-12. Hey, you know what's funny is Tom, I guess one of the first books Tom read was Timothy Good's Above Top Secret, which was pretty much on Majestic 12. I think he said in interviews that that's sort of what inspired Aliens Exist, that song. It's kind of funny because, like, obviously I didn't know about Majestic 12 or MJ or any UFO lore back when that shit came out, which was 1999. So I was like fucking 3rd grade or something. So yeah, I had no idea. But obviously the lyrics at the end is 12 Majestic Lies is the last thing he says, which is obviously a nod to the Majestic 12 and Timothy Good in his book. But in the live version of Aliens Exist, they do those live albums. And, Blink is known for their banter back and forth and being really raunchy and making fun of each other on stage. So at the end of Aliens Exist on the live version, after Tom says 12 Majestic Lies, Mark goes, "Tom has sex with guys," and sings that. And that's what I think about every time I hear Majestic 12. This Tom banging dudes. So fun fact, yeah, it's a great album. So on that note, MJ-12, go.
Okay, I don't think this would take very long to read, but I feel like this is the best breakdown available of MJ-12, and it's from Timothy Good's Above Top Secret.
Perfect.
And so here we go. It says, according to a document acquired by TV producer Jamie Shandera in 1984, a highly secret panel codenamed Majestic 12, or MJ-12, was formed by President Truman in 1947 to investigate UFOs and report on its findings to the president. The document, dated 18th of November 1952, and classified top secret /magic/eyes only, was allegedly prepared for President-elect Dwight Eisenhower, and includes the astonishing statement that the remains of 4 alien bodies were recovered 2 miles from the Roswell wreckage site.
Hey guys, back at the playground again, huh?
Yep. You know what this playground could use? A wine country.
Heck yeah, and some waves, so we could go surfing.
Oh, love that.
A redwood forest would be cool.
I'm in.
Ski slopes.
Let's do it.
Can a girl go shopping?
Yeah, baby.
Wait! Did we just invent California?
Discover why California is the ultimate playground at visitcalifornia.com.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing, it's precision crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turn up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision crafted performance.
Take your vibes on Google.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
The document names the 12 high-ranking members of the panel. They were Lloyd Berkner, Detlev Bronk, Vannevar Bush, James Forrestal, Gordon Gray, Roscoe Hillenkoetter, Jerome Hunsaker, Donald Menzel, Robert Montague, Sidney Sewers, Nathan Twining, and Hoyt Vandenberg. Dr. Lloyd Berkner, a scientist who was an executive secretary of the Joint Research and Development Board in 1946 under Dr. Vannevar Bush, also headed a special committee to direct a study that led to the establishment of the Weapons System Evaluation Group. He was also a member of the CIA's Robertson Panel, a scientific advisory panel on UFOs requested by the White House and sponsored by the CIA in 1953. Dr. Detlev Bronk was an internationally known physiologist and biophysicist who was chairman of the National Research Council and a member of the Medical Advisory Board of the Atomic Energy Commission, with Dr. Edward Condon, director of the National Bureau of Standards, who later headed the Air Force-sponsored UFO project at the University of Colorado. Bronk became a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Brookhaven National Laboratory. Dr. Vannevar Bush, recognized as one of America's leading scientists, organized the National Defense Research Council in 1941 and the Office of Scientific Research and Development in 1943, which led to the establishment of the Manhattan Project to develop the first atomic bomb. After the war, Dr. Bush became head of the Joint Research and Development Board. As the Canadian government scientist Wilbert Smith noted in his top-secret memorandum, Dr. Bush headed a small group set up to investigate UFOs, which matter, quote, is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher even than the H-bomb, end quote. Could this small group have been Majestic 12? If so, Bush's background in coordinating top-secret intelligence research projects would have made him the ideal choice to head the group. In 1949, for instance, the U.S. Intelligence Board, the coordinating body of all U.S. government intelligence agencies, commissioned Bush to recommend methods of linking all the intelligence bureaucracies, a move initiated by James Forrestal, coincidentally another member of MJ-12. James Forrestal served as Secretary of the Navy before becoming Secretary of Defense in July 1947, the time of the Roswell incident, a position he held until a mental breakdown led to his resignation in March of 1949. He committed suicide at Bethesda Naval Hospital in May 1949. Gordon Gray was Assistant Secretary of the Army at the time when MJ-12 was established, and became Secretary of the Army in 1949. In 1950, he was appointed as Special Assistant to President Truman on National Security Affairs, and in 1951, according to William Steinman, directed the Psychological Strategy Board, referred to in a 1952 CIA memorandum from Director Walter Bedell Smith, discussing the psychological warfare implications of UFOs. Vice Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter was the third Director of Central Intelligence, DCI, from 1947 to 1950, and the first Director of the CIA, which was established in the same month as MJ-12, September 1947. Hillenkoetter was one of the first intelligence chiefs to make public his conviction that UFOs were real, and that, quote, through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense, end quote. Hillenkoetter was also on the board of directors of the National Intelligence Committee on Aerial Phenomena, or NICAP, and was therefore in an excellent position to monitor the activities of this influential civilian group. Dr. Jerome Hunsaker was a brilliant aircraft designer who headed the departments of mechanical and aeronautical engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and was chairman of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. His opinion on the materials recovered at Roswell would have been invaluable. Dr. Donald Menzel was director of the Harvard College Observatory and is chiefly remembered for his dismissive statements on books and UFOs, all of which, he said, could be explained in mundane terms. Menzel would have been helpful as an astronomical consultant to MJ-12, and later as the world's most widely read UFO debunker. He was also involved with the National Security Agency and held a top-secret ultra-security clearance. General Robert Montague was base commander at the Atomic Energy Commission installation at Sandia Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico, from July 1947 to February 1951. Rear Admiral Sidney Sowers was the first director of Central Intelligence and in September 1947 became Executive Secretary of the National Security Council. Following his resignation in 1950, Sowers was retained as a special consultant to the executive on security matters. General Nathan Twining was an outstanding commander of bombing operations in both the European and Pacific theaters during World War II. In 1945, he was appointed Commanding General of Air Materiel Command based at Wright Field, now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. A declassified secret document reveals that in September 1947, Twining presented the conclusions of AMC that, quote, the phenomenon reported is something real, end quote, further details of which will be discussed later. Significantly, Twining suddenly canceled a planned trip to the West Coast on July 8, 1947, the day of the first press release announcing the recovery of a crashed disc near Roswell. Quote, due to a very important and sudden matter, end quote. William Moore has learned that while reporters were told that Twining was out of the office, probably in Washington, D.C., he had in fact made a sudden trip to New Mexico, where he remained until 10th of July. The remaining member of the alleged MJ-12 panel was General Hoyt Vandenberg. Following a distinguished career in the Army Air Forces, he became the second director of Central Intelligence in 1946, a position he held until May of 1947. In August 1948, when a top-secret estimate of the situation by the Air Technical Intelligence Center offered its opinion that UFOs were interplanetary, Vandenberg, Air Force Chief of Staff at the time, ordered the document to be burned. My inquiries into the authenticity of the Majestic 12 story during a research trip to the United States in 1986 have led me to believe that the group did indeed exist, and the document seems authentic enough. Unfortunately, all the members are now deceased, and my questions addressed to a former director of the CIA, as well as 2 ex-presidents, remain unanswered, which is hardly surprising. But it is interesting that MJ-12 crops up in an alleged Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or AFOSI, document dated 17th of November 1980. Paragraph 2 states, official U.S. government policy and results of Project Aquarius is still classified top secret with no dissemination outside official intelligence channels and with restricted access to MJ-12. AFOSI have informed me that the retyped document is a fabrication, yet the existence of Project Aquarius has now been confirmed by the National Security Agency. It is still classified top secret, and details therefore remain exempt from disclosure. There is as yet no official confirmation of the existence of MJ-12, however. And that's the end of that part. That's a good recap, though. Yeah, it gives you a good summary of who all these gentlemen were, because I think that people only really remember Forrestal and Vannevar Bush. A lot of these other people get lost in the shuffle, but the intelligence agencies were deeply embedded in this group.
Yeah, well now, whenever I hear of the James Forrestal suicide, I don't know if have you ever seen The 11th Green? It was like a 2020 UFO movie. It was pretty good.
Yeah,
it was okay.
I saw that on the recommendation of Jacques Kiel, that user. Nice. And it was one of the trippiest movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, it is really weird. But that movie was actually dedicated to James Forrestal. Yeah, that scene was pretty dark. Where, it's basically 2 guys give him the choice between seeing his family die or killing himself, basically. I guess it's insinuating that was the CIA. Obviously, it's a UFO movie, so it had to do with what he knew about the UFO phenomenon. Or he was going to tell, what was he going to do?
I heard a few different versions of it.
He was going to basically disclose. This is what it said in the 11th Green.
It said, dedicated to the memory of James V. Forrestal, 1892 to 1949, who understood the significance of the events and sought to act honorably amid treachery.
But I guess the official version was that he was going crazy about communism or something. Yeah, he left like a poem as a suicide note, reportedly.
Oh, well, I know about that. I wrote about that in the last article I finished.
Yeah,
it was Sophocles' Ajax.
Yeah, Ajax.
It was an ancient Greek poem about this general that basically there's a dispute over who's gonna get who's gonna get Achilles' armor after Achilles dies. And Ajax feels, because he carried his body out of the battlefield, that he should get Achilles' armor. And they end up having this long debate, and they decide that Odysseus is going to get the armor. And Ajax decides that he's going to get revenge against Odysseus and everyone who decided that Ajax wasn't worthy of receiving this armor. And he starts plotting to kill these guys. And the Greek gods are watching, and Athena decides to drive Ajax insane. And Ajax thinks he's killing Odysseus and his men, and he's really just slaughtering livestock in front of a bunch of people and like humiliating himself. And then when he like comes to out of this frenzy that Athena put him in, he gets like really depressed, and he tells his wife Tecmessa that he like wants to die. Disgraced almost, I would say. The story ends with Ajax falling on his sword and killing himself, and Tecmessa finding him. It's a really grim story. But there's a poem in the story where Ajax is like proclaiming to Salamis, and it's like a poem within the play, and that's the part where they found supposedly Forrestal had been taking notes on. But I don't know deeper than that. I just know that that's the story, and that's a strange story, especially given the context of like how Greek gods and Greek myth seem to be so like, intrinsically like involved with all this. It's like, that's a little on the nose, don't you think?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the specific poem, yeah, it's pretty dark.
So this is from John Keel's The Mothman Prophecy about James Forrestal. Quote, "The U.S. government is being taken over by the space people," end quote. This rumor spread throughout the country in 1967, an updated version of the old devil theory. Actually, it got its start in 1949 when James Forrestal, the brilliant Secretary of Defense in the Truman Cabinet, went bananas and raced through the corridors of the Pentagon screaming, "We're being invaded and we can't stop them." He was convinced that his phones were being tapped and some enormous conspiracy was underway. Soon after he was placed in a hospital, he leaped out a window to his death. While the press blamed his paranoia on the tensions of the Cold War, the UFO enthusiasts knew better. Air Force intelligence had compiled a top-secret estimate of the situation following their UFO investigations in 1947 to 1948. Their conclusion, according to the late Captain Edward Rappelt, was that the flying saucers were extraterrestrial. Forrestal, so the story went, was one of the few to read that report before Air Force Chief of Staff Hoyt Vandenberg ordered all copies destroyed, and it blew his mind. Two other top military men, General George Marshall and General Douglas MacArthur, were obsessed with the flying saucer phenomenon. MacArthur made several public statements declaring that the next war would be fought against evil beings from outer space. A fabled think tank, the RAND Corporation, was assigned to feed UFO data into a computer and fight an imaginary war with these evil beings. Since we wouldn't know where they come from, what their technology was, or how to attack their bases, the computer advised us to surrender. So yeah, that's pretty grim.
Cool. Oh man, that's nuts.
The people are learning so much.
What Alright, so MJ12 is this group of 12 dudes. What do you really think it is?
Well, as of recently with Forbidden Science 6 coming out, I think that it's what Valet says in Forbidden Science 6 about James Angleton. but given like what it is at its core, it would be like the first example of a presidential special access program, and it would be it would be even deeper than that. It would be like an executive branch that
didn't Eric Davis call it a PEAD, or the PEAD? It stand for. He did it in the recent Soul Foundation interview he did with Peter Skafish and Kirk McConnell. Presidential Emergency Action Document.
So this is a part I think is like worth reading from Vallee's Forbidden Science 5, and he's explaining how Kit Green continually is like espousing this Serpo myth. And as background, he talks about Rick Doty in the bottom of the page, and he says, Rick Doty, a consultant to a 10-year project to monitor the Utah Ranch, has been mentioned among possible conduits for the Serpo story. Earlier, he's also reported in the literature in connection with the fake data given to Paul Benowitz in Albuquerque about supposed signals from aliens. Other researchers like Linda Howe have stated he provided information about MJ-12 and hypnotic regressions. So Vallee writes, I feel physically exhausted and mentally drained. Too many plans, too many trips across time zones, too many moving parts, too many uncertainties, and those puzzling messages from Kit in Beijing talking about hidden hardware while promoting the dubious Serpo project, supposedly a top-secret human exchange program with the aliens, as if this crude hoax were a serious endeavor. Actually, Kit may have his own reasons to maintain a keen interest in that expanding, silly Serpo charade. He is certain, one, that the tall tale comes from, quote, current executive branch individuals, end quote, one of whom told him he was pushing the hoax officially. Two, that some meetings attended by himself and Howe over the last 3 years were secretly monitored. 3, that even a website for which he has responsibility was used to disseminate the poison of Serpo memes. And 4, that medical data on spinal cord injury and repair, a classified project about which he was briefed, are included in the material, in violation of secrecy rules. All of that is like Chinese to me, unnecessarily obscure. So I know that that's probably a lot of information for people, but the thought that I found interesting was that Vallee felt that he should mention, even as I was reading the Timothy Good excerpt, he brought up the AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and that's of course where the office that Richard Doty famously worked out of. And the fact that Vallee is like kind of tying a lot of these myths into what was being disseminated in that Serpo hoax, how Kit Green is implying that it came from or is coming from the executive branch, I thought was very fascinating, especially in this context of like what MJ-12 was at its core. It was a presidentially appointed group to handle this topic.
Vallee basically said they were two different kind of streams of disinformation. I'll read that one little part from Forbidden Science 6, October 11th, 2014. It says, further research has clarified the nature of most, if not all, MJ-12 documents. The leaked papers were never hoaxed. They were official active measures documents produced by CIA counterintelligence chief J.J. Angleton in the 1960s to track the flow of stolen classified U.S. government documents through Soviet espionage. There were also non-MJ-12 documents that were AFOSI disinformation targeting Benowitz. Counterintelligence tradecraft involves deep secrets. I'm told the quote leak of the false MJ-12 documents through noted ufologists may have been a botched, ill-conceived attempt by DoD. Pretty fascinating. It kind of goes along with what other people in that group have said about these MJ-12 documents. It's almost like a too good to be true situation. It's like there's